I am going to be giving you some information about two very serious scams that cost businesses, unlike your own, billions of dollars, and they're very damaging. And I'm starting with business email compromise and email account compromise. This is a sophisticated scam targeting both businesses and individuals performing transfers of funds. The scam is frequently carried out when a scammer compromises legitimate business email accounts through social engineering or computer intrusion techniques to conduct unauthorized transfers of funds. For example, an employee of yours may get an email that appears to be from an executive within the company or another business with which your company has a relationship. The email will contain an urgent request for confidential information, maybe a payment or a wire transfer that seems legitimate, but actually funnels money directly to a criminal. In 2013, these types of scams routinely began with hacking or spoofing email accounts of CEOs or CFOs, and fraudulent emails were sent requesting wire payments be sent to fraudulent locations. Over the years, this scam has evolved to include compromise of personal emails, vendor emails, lawyer email accounts, requests for W-2 information, targeting the real estate sector, and fraudulent requests for large amounts of gift cards. As the fraudsters have become more sophisticated, these scams have evolved also. In 2020, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, observed an increase in the number of business email compromise complaints related to the use of identity theft and funds being converted to cryptocurrency. In these variations, the victim was initially involved in a tech support scam or a romance scam or some other type of fraud during which the victim provided some form of ID to the scammer. That identifying information was then used to establish a bank account to receive these stolen funds, and then the funds were transferred to cryptocurrency accounts. I recently had an opportunity to hear the tale of a local business owner who was purchasing manufacturing equipment from China. After visiting China and finalizing the purchase, he returned home and soon received an email directing him to wire $500,000 towards the purchase. Well, since the timing was so perfect, he had no reason to suspect this email was fraudulent, and he promptly wired the funds, only to learn later that the email was not from the manufacturing company in China. In this particular case, despite his efforts, this business owner was never able to recover that $500,000. In the last year, IC3 reported seeing an increase in the number of business email compromise complaints related to the diversion of payroll funds or employee information. In this type of scheme, a company's human resources or payroll department receives an email appearing to be from a corporate exec asking that W-2 forms be scanned and sent to them or a third party, or from an employee requesting to update their direct deposit information to a new account. Personal confidential information from W-2s is easily sold on the dark web and exposes your staff to ID theft, and employee wages diverted to criminals are very difficult to recover. And under these current conditions with the pandemic and a lot of people working remotely, it makes your business even more vulnerable to business email compromise scams. Employees are not in the office like they used to be, and they're accustomed to communicating with their supervisors by email. They may not take the time to verify that the email is legitimate. And the uptick in purchasing online and using electronic payments has also made your business more vulnerable to business email compromise scams. Whoops, wrong way. So tips to avoid becoming a victim. Take technical precautions. Use multi-factor authentication for email logins and other changes in email settings. Train employees in internet security. Be suspicious of change. An email request for a wire transfer to a new vendor, or possibly an old vendor giving you a new account, is a big red flag. Train employees to confirm these types of emailed requests before they take any action. And this is so important that you train your staff that these types of scams exist. And if they get an email that seems to be from you or the CEO or CFO asking for money or employee information, that they do not respond to that email. They pick up the phone and they call that CEO or CFO and confirm that the email is from them. Pay close attention to the email address. Scammers will often use an email address that has a domain name that almost exactly looks like the company's URL. It may be off by just one letter, or it may end in .co instead of .com. If you're victimized by a business email compromise fraud, immediately contact your bank and try to get the payment stopped. If you do this within 48 hours, your chances are better that the funds could be recovered. And you can complain to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. I'll be mentioning that several times. It's at ic3.gov, ic3.gov. Again, as Phil mentioned, the collection of this information is so important for law enforcement officials to track down the perpetrators of these crimes and avoid future victims. So let's talk about ransomware. Ransomware is a form of malicious software that denies you access to your own data. Once you fall victim to this attack, your data is encrypted. The attacker then demands a ransom from you with the promise to restore access to your data once you pay it. Cyber criminals may also pressure you to pay the ransom by threatening to destroy your data or releasing confidential information to have be made available to the public. Ransomware attacks aren't really new. They started taking place in the 1980s. Hackers typically demanded payment by credit card then and used that credit card information to go on spending sprees. A few years later, some hijackers began demanding payment in the form of iTunes gift cards. Today, it's not unusual for them to demand payment in Bitcoin, which, as you know, is a digital currency used independently of the banking system. A fairly new extortion tactic is to demand the victim's list of email contacts. The criminals will then only release the files if 2 or more of your email contacts respond by also paying a ransom. Criminals sometimes go a step further by capturing confidential or personally compromising files, which they threaten to release publicly if payment isn't made. And if you're a healthcare professional and you have confidential healthcare records, or information about customers, their accounts, their addresses, etc., you can imagine how damaging to your business's reputation that can be if that kind of information is threatened to be released to the public. Although cyber criminals use a variety of techniques to infect victims with ransomware, there are some common ways they do this. Email phishing campaigns are common. They'll send an email containing a malicious file or a link, which will deploy malware when opened or clicked by the recipient. They have historically used generic, broad-based spamming strategies to deploy their malware, though recent ransomware campaigns have been much more targeted and sophisticated. Criminals may also compromise a victim's email account with a malware that enables them to use your own email account to further spread this infection. There are also vulnerabilities in remote desktop protocols, or RDPs. These are proprietary network protocols that allow individuals to control the resources and data of a computer over the internet. Cyber criminals have used both brute force methods, a technique using trial and error to obtain user credentials, and credentials purchased on the dark web to gain unauthorized RDP access to victims' systems, and software vulnerabilities. Cyber criminals can take advantage of security weaknesses in widely used software programs to gain control of victims' systems and deploy ransomware. Regarding the losses that you see on this slide, and they're substantial, this number doesn't include estimates of lost business, lost time, wages, files, equipment, or costs given to any third-party remediation experts to help you recover your data. And it only represents what victims have reported to IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. Oh, why can't I do this right? Okay, tips to avoid becoming a ransomware victim. And these are, again, things you should pass along to people in your company that aren't here today, and make sure your employees and those IT responsible people in your company are aware of all of these. First, don't click on links from unfamiliar sources. Be especially wary of emails requiring you to act quickly, that ask for personal information or threaten in some way. Keep clean machines and stay up to date with software. Operating systems, software, applications should always be kept current and up to date. Make sure your antivirus and anti-malware solutions are set to automatically update, and run regular scans on your network. Use strong authentication, requiring more than a username and password to access accounts, especially critical networks, to prevent access through stolen or hacked credentials. Very important to conduct regular backups. If you are backing up your data, especially backing it up to an external source, you're very much less vulnerable to someone encrypting the data that's stored on your network. So you should back up your data regularly, double check that the backups were complete, and make sure that the backups aren't just stored on the computers on your network, because if that's hacked into, your backups can also be compromised. And if you happen to have a third party that stores some of your data, make sure you are aware of how they're handling backing it up. Make sure there's an agreement with them, how that your data that they're storing on their site is extremely secure. Make better passwords. Require long, strong, and unique passwords to better harden your accounts against intrusions. And pop-up blockers, you can enable those so that scammers are not going to be so easy to put up a pop-up that you can click on thinking it's something else. You can adjust your browser settings to avoid those pop-up blockers. And as we already talked about, make sure you are backing up your data to somewhere off-site. If you are a ransomware victim, contact the authorities. Your local FBI field office can give you assistance. File a report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at ic3.gov. Disconnect infected computers, limit the damage. If your data's been stolen, make steps to protect your company and notify your customers if there is a chance that the data that you have stored that it contains information about your customers has been a victim of ransomware. Make sure you notify your customers. There are also professionals you can hire, remediation services, to try to help you recover from this, but check those companies very carefully. And as it says here, the FBI does not support paying a ransom in response to these attacks. It doesn't guarantee that you'll get your data back. It also encourages these perpetrators to keep doing this, to keep attacking systems and demanding ransom. And the money that is being paid as a result of these ransomware attacks can be going into illegal activities that none of us certainly want to fund. That's everything I had, and if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to answer them.